Across the UK, ancient pubs have stood for centuries, places filled with laughter, music, and restless spirits. Behind every creaking door and flickering candle lies a story waiting to be told. 1. The Boot and Slipper, Amersham. If you ever find yourself wandering the streets of Amersham, perhaps on a damp Tuesday evening, with nothing but the mist and a stubborn craving for a pint, you might stumble upon a little pub called the Boot and Slipper. On the surface, it's the picture of country pub charm. Low beams, warm fire, decent bitter, even a chalkboard menu that changes with the seasons. But speak to the regulars, not the chatty ones near the bar, the quiet ones in the corners, and you might hear something a little odd. You see, there's a story that goes back decades. A new landlord took over sometime in the 70s. Cheerful chap, ran a tight ship. Everything was fine until he started noticing footprints. Not just the usual muddy tracks from careless walkers, these were different. Every morning, without fail, there'd be a single trail of boot prints, always from the door to the fireplace, never the other way round. He checked the locks. Nothing, no sign of a break-in. The prints were fresh, still damp, but the pub had been locked up all night. Then came the footsteps. Not during the day, no, always in the small hours when the fire was out and the punters long gone. Heavy, deliberate steps from the hallway to the bar and back again, steady as a metronome, until, suddenly, they'd stop. One barman followed them once. Up the old staircase, torch in hand, heart in throat. When he got to the landing, silence. Then, lights flickered downstairs. That was his last shift. Some say it's the ghost of a coachman trampled by his own horses outside the pub in the 1800s. Others reckon it's just an old punter, too fond of his pint to pass on proper. But there's one local, Old George, 3 stools from the end, who says the same thing every time someone brings it up. It's not the footsteps you hear you need to worry about. It's the ones that stop just behind you. The Boot and Slipper still does a lovely roast on Sundays. But if you visit, maybe give the fireplace a miss after dark. And whatever you do, if you come in and the floor's wet and there's mud near the hearth, don't follow it. Just order a pint and sit somewhere. Well lit. Cheers. 2. The Plume of Feathers, Greenwich. Greenwich is famous for many things. Maritime history, the prime meridian, and if you know where to stand, a stunning view of the Thames. But slip away from the usual crowds, past the museums and weekend markets, and you'll discover a quiet, cobbled lane where the Plume of Feathers has been welcoming locals with a pint since 1691. The pub feels timeless, low beams, uneven floors, and a garden that glows golden on a sunny afternoon. Yet once darkness falls, a different atmosphere settles in. There's a tale or two the regulars whisper about. They say a naval officer, decked out in full uniform, hat, greatcoat and all, sometimes takes a silent seat at the far end of the bar. He never orders, never speaks, just nurses his drink. And strangely enough, the barman never sees him enter or leave. Legend has it, he was a Napoleonic war officer who came home on leave, sat down for a quiet drink, and never left. Some say he died suddenly that night, his spirit refusing to abandon his favorite spot. Near that corner, the air often chills abruptly, not just cool, but a biting cold, as though the river's breeze slipped in through a hidden door. And then there's the footsteps. Staff, even those who don't believe in ghosts, have heard heavy boots pacing above. The upstairs rooms, supposedly empty, just used for storage. No guests, No one should be wandering up there. One evening, a cleaner went upstairs to check. She swears she heard a voice right behind her say, quietly, "I'll take the usual." After that, the upper floor was locked tight. She never dared go back. Locals have their own way of handling the eerie sounds. If the footsteps echo, they pour an extra shot of rum and leave it on the bar. For the officer, they say, he's earned it. Despite all this, the Plume of Feathers remains a cozy spot for a quiet pint. Friendly faces, hearty food. Just be wary if you find yourself glancing over your shoulder. And if your drink suddenly disappears, well, that's probably him. So, raise your glass with a quiet nod to a spirit who's still part of the family at the Plume of Feathers. 3. The Prestonville Arms, Brighton. Brighton's full of characters. Artists, musicians, retirees with small dogs in expensive coats, and somewhere among them, quite possibly, a ghost or two. Now, the Prestonville Arms isn't right by the seafront. It's tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, up a hill most tourists never bother climbing. Which is probably for the best, because if the stories are to be believed, there's something about this pub that doesn't quite rest. It's a lovely little spot, by the way. Great roast, good cider. But there's a particular room near the back, a snug, they call it, with a low ceiling and old wooden panels. Cozy, sure, but wrong, somehow, just slightly off. Ask any staff who's worked there more than a month, and they'll tell you the same thing. That room has moods. Sometimes it feels warm and welcoming, like the pub wants you to stay. Other nights, it's cold, even when the fire's on. Glasses go cloudy, candles flicker strangely. One bartender swore she saw her reflection blink before she did. People have reported the door locking itself from the inside, even when no one's in there. And once, during a staff lock-in, someone tried to open it, only to hear whispering just beyond the door. Low, urgent, like two people arguing. By the time they got it open, nothing. Room empty. Not even a draft. There's no tragic tale attached, no documented death or scandal, which somehow makes it worse, as if whatever's there doesn't need a reason. It just is. Some say the pub was built over an older house, something from the Georgian period long forgotten. Others reckon it's Brighton itself, all that salt air and Victorian weirdness clinging to the walls like damp. Whatever the cause, the rule remains. Don't linger too long in the snug when you're alone. And if the door closes on its own, let it. There are friendlier corners to drink in, like near the dartboard, or by the front door, where the spirits tend to mind their manners. Just don't look too long in the mirrors. 4. The Hide Tavern, Winchester. Some pubs feel old because of the furniture, others because of the damp. But the Hide Tavern, tucked away at the bottom of Hyde Street in Winchester, feels old in a different way, as if the walls themselves remember too much. It's a beautiful spot, ivy-covered, with a narrow stairwell that creaks like it's got something to say. The ceilings are low, the beer's good, and the regulars are quiet. Not because they're unfriendly, just respectful somehow. Because everyone knows you don't speak too loudly in the Hyde after dark, not since the music started. Not live music. They don't do that anymore. No, this is something else. A faint melody, drifting up from the cellar late at night. No instruments, no voice, just a hum. Gentle. Familiar, almost, like an old folk tune you can't quite name. It never plays when the pub is full, only when it's nearly empty and the lights are low and someone's about to lock up. One landlord, ex-army, didn't believe in ghosts, went down to check it out once. Came back up pale as ash, said nothing, quit 2 weeks later. Never told anyone what he saw. Then, there's the girl. She's not often seen, just sensed. A passing cold behind you. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A fleeting movement in the stairwell mirror. One night, a guest in the upstairs room said he heard quiet footsteps outside his door. Their feet, soft on wood. When he looked through the keyhole, there was no one there. Just darkness. But he swore he could hear breathing. Slow, steady, just inches away. The pub doesn't advertise any of this, of course. They let the stories settle like dust, undisturbed. If you ask the locals, most will shrug, sip their pint, and change the subject. But if you listen carefully, some might tell you she's not unkind, just lonely. So if you ever visit the Hide Tavern, be polite. Leave the last seat by the fire empty, and if you hear humming beneath the floorboards, don't hum along. 5. Williamsons Tavern, London. London's full of secrets. Some hide behind closed doors, others behind pints of bitter and a whisper over the bar. Tucked just off Groveland Court, blink and you'll miss it, sits Williamsons Tavern. It's the kind of place you end up in by accident. You turn the wrong corner, chasing a shortcut to St. Paul's, and there it is. Worn brick, iron lantern, and a doorway that feels like it hasn't opened properly since the 18th century. Now, by day, it's city folk and decent sandwiches. By night, something else. They say the tavern once held a private entrance to the residence of the Lord Mayor of London. A tunnel, long bricked up, that ran beneath the street. But sometimes, just after closing, the staff still hear it. A knock, slow, deliberate, coming from inside the wall behind the bar. Not the pipes, they've checked, not mice, too deep, too rhythmic, just 3 knocks, always 3, then silence. There's a chair near the fireplace, carved oak, worn smooth at the arms. They say if you sit there alone, you'll feel a hand on your shoulder, not threatening, not cold, just firm, as if someone's asking you to move. One evening, a young accountant, tipsy, curious, stayed behind after a Thursday round of drinks. He decided to explore upstairs, where guests aren't meant to go. He didn't find much, just a dusty room with old portraits and a candle that smelled faintly of cloves. But later, reviewing photos on his phone, he found something odd. In one of the frames, just over his shoulder, was the edge of a face, pale, watching. He deleted the photo, but swore, weeks later, he saw that same face again. In the mirror, above the urinals, just for a second. The staff don't encourage questions. And the locals, well, city drinkers don't like to admit they believe in ghosts. But the next time you're walking down Groveland Court after dark and feel like you're being watched, just keep walking. And if you do stop in for a pint, never ask to go upstairs. That part of the building doesn't always like visitors. 6. The Hollybush. Hampstead. Hampstead's full of ghosts. Not the moaning in the hallway kind, more the type that wear perfume and disappear around corners. And among all the winding lanes and ivy-covered houses, you'll find the Hollybush, one of London's most beloved old pubs. It's the kind of place where the wallpaper peels in just the right way, the candles flicker without fuss, and the regulars speak in low voices as though not to wake the past. Because the past here never quite left. There's a story that's been whispered in the upstairs room for years about her. No name, no date. Just the woman in the window. She's seen rarely, always at dusk, always from the street. A pale figure standing behind the top floor pane, looking out as if waiting for someone or watching someone go. Visitors have reported a sudden stillness upon entering, a soft scent in the air, Lilac perhaps, something floral, old-fashioned. One barmaid says that sometimes, when she's polishing glasses alone, she hears a sigh behind her. Just a breath. Not quite sad, not quite content, just lingering. The pub records say the top floor once housed a private room, back when writers and painters met here after the war. But there's a much older rumor of a woman who lived nearby, long ago, who'd visit the tavern each night, sitting at the same table by the window, waiting for a man who never returned from France. They say she died in that room, not tragically, not dramatically, just quietly, one winter evening. As if she'd simply grown tired of waiting. And now, she waits still. She's not frightening. She's never spoken, never moved. But those who've locked up late say the curtains sometimes shift, ever so slightly, in a room with no windows open. And every so often, a glass left on that old corner table, untouched, will be found with the faintest trace of lipstick, a color no one wears anymore. They say she only appears to those who've lost someone, as if she recognizes grief and offers company. So if you ever find yourself at the holly bush as the light begins to fade and you feel a chill that isn't quite from the wind, look up, and if she's there, just nod politely. She's waited long enough. The Tinner's Arms, Zena, Cornwall. If you ever find yourself on the wild Cornish coast near the village of Zena, you might hear tales whispered by the wind, stories older than the hills themselves. At the heart of the village stands the Tinner's Arms, a cozy pub with low beams and a fire that never quite seems to die down. It's a place where fishermen, miners, and travelers gather to share a drink, and sometimes a secret. One legend, passed down from those who worked the tin mines long ago, speaks of a woman known only as the Mermaid of Zena. They say she once came ashore, drawn by the voices from the mine shafts and the lonely songs of the sea. Some say she fell in love with a miner, a man who promised to leave the dark tunnels and join her beneath the waves. But promises made between land and sea are never simple. One stormy night, the miner disappeared, lost to the sea or the mines, no one knows. And the mermaid was never seen again. But the story doesn't end there. They say if you sit quietly in the corner near the fireplace, when the wind howls and the waves crash, you might hear her singing, a haunting melody, half laughter, half lament. Staff at the Tinner's Arms have told of glasses moving on their own and shadows slipping through the wooden beams, like the fleeting tail of a mermaid disappearing beneath the surface. One visitor even swore he saw a figure, shimmering and dripping, standing by the door. When he blinked, there was nothing but the sound of the sea. So if you're ever at the Tinner's Arms when the storm rolls in and the fire crackles low, listen. For the song of the sea and the sigh of a love lost between two worlds. And if you feel a gentle splash on your ankle as you raise your glass, well, that's just the mermaid reminding you she's still near. 8. Ye Old Talbot, Worcester. Tucked away in the heart of Worcester, Ye Old Talbot stands as a silent witness to centuries of stories, some bright, some dark, and some that refuse to be forgotten. This pub dates back to the 15th century, a time when knights roamed, merchants bargained, and battles were never far from the city walls. Legend has it that during the English Civil War, a fierce skirmish raged close by. One of the local knights, Sir Edmund Talbot, fought bravely but never returned home. Since then, many claim his spirit lingers still. Regulars at the Talbot speak in hushed tones about the knight who haunts the hearth. Not as a threat, but as a guardian. Late at night, when the pub is empty except for the crackling fire, patrons have reported hearing the faint clatter of armor, the slow, measured steps of a man still pacing the old floorboards. One landlord recalls finding his tankard mysteriously half empty in the morning, though he swore he left it untouched the night before. The air sometimes carries a scent, not of smoke or ale, but something earthier. Horse sweat, damp leather, the unmistakable smell of a battle long past. And if you glance at the shadows by the fire, you might just catch a glimpse of a figure in chainmail, his helmet tilted back to reveal a weary face, watching over the pub he once called home. But be warned, Sir Edmund doesn't like loud voices or disrespect. The Talbot is a place for quiet remembrance, for raising a glass to those who've gone before. So if you find yourself in Worcester and the night draws in, step inside ye Old Talbot, order a pint, listen closely, and perhaps, just perhaps, you'll feel the weight of history settle around you. 9. The Black Bull, Haworth. Nestled deep in the misty moors of Yorkshire, the village of Haworth holds secrets older than the rolling hills themselves. At its heart stands the Black Bull, a sturdy old pub with heavy beams and a fire that fights the chill. Locals swear the place is haunted, not by one spirit but many. The moors around Haworth have long been places of mystery, where folk tales of witches, lost souls, and restless spirits mingle with the wind. Inside the Black Bull, the most common tale is that of the Grey Lady, a shadowy figure often seen gliding past the snug windows late at night. She's said to be the restless spirit of a woman wronged long ago, wandering the pub's wooden floors, searching for peace. Patrons have reported glasses tipping over on their own, chairs scraping as if moved by unseen hands, and footsteps echoing down the empty corridors. One old-timer recalls sitting alone at the bar when the temperature dropped suddenly, the breath visible, the lights flickering, and a cold hand resting gently on his shoulder. He didn't turn around. And then there's the tale of the Black Bull's dog, a loyal companion who passed away decades ago, but whose barking can still be heard faintly outside on foggy nights. Locals say the pub respects its ghosts, and so do the ghosts respect the living. They rarely cause harm, but they remind all who enter that Haworth's past never truly sleeps. So, if you find yourself on the Yorkshire moors, seeking shelter from the mist and wind, step inside the Black Bull. Raise your glass, keep your wits about you, and maybe, just maybe, you'll feel a presence lingering near. A whisper of history wrapped in the cold Yorkshire air. 10. The Blind Fiddler, Buntingford. In the quiet market town of Buntingford, nestled among old stone cottages and winding lanes, sits the Blind Fiddler, a pub that feels like home the moment you step inside. Warm light spills from leaded windows, and the scent of wood smoke mingles with freshly poured ale. But behind its welcoming facade lies a story as old as the village itself. They say the pub is named after a musician, a fiddler who lost his sight, but not his passion for music. Legend tells that in the late 1800s, this blind fiddler played every evening, filling the room with lively tunes that made even the most hardened farmers tap their feet. But one stormy winter, he vanished without a trace. Some say he drowned in the nearby river. Others believe he simply walked into the mist, following a song only he could hear. Since then, visitors and staff have reported strange things. Sometimes, late at night, the sound of a fiddle drifts softly through the air. Sweet, haunting, but with no one in sight. Glasses gently tremble, as if caught in an invisible rhythm. And once, a local told of feeling a gentle hand guide him through the dark when he was lost in the pub's twisting corridors. No one is sure if it's the fiddler himself, a spirit still playing, still guiding, or perhaps just the echo of music that never dies. but the Blind Fiddler welcomes all who seek warmth and song, living or otherwise. So if ever you find yourself in Buntingford on a chilly evening, pull up a chair, order a pint, and listen closely. You might just hear the faint strains of a fiddle playing from somewhere unseen. 11. The Old Hoppole, West Bromwich. Nestled in the industrial heart of West Bromwich, the Old Hoppole stands as a relic of a bygone era, its weathered brick walls and timber beams telling stories of hard work and long nights. But beneath the everyday bustle, whispers linger of a presence that refuses to be forgotten. Back in the 19th century, the Old Hoppole was a favorite haunt for factory workers, miners, and travelers seeking respite. Among them was a man named Thomas, a laborer known for his kindness but burdened by a dark past. It's said Thomas met a tragic end here in a scuffle after a late-night drink, leaving behind a spirit unsettled. Since then, patrons have felt cold drafts sweeping through the tavern, glasses shuddering on the bar, and the faint echo of footsteps pacing the old wooden floors, even when the pub is empty. One landlord recalls hearing whispered conversations just beyond the walls, voices too soft to understand but impossible to ignore. Some say Thomas still walks the Old Hoppole, restless and searching, perhaps for forgiveness or simply for peace. But despite his presence, the spirit is not malevolent. Rather, it serves as a silent guardian, reminding all who enter of the pub's long, often hard-fought history. So if you find yourself in West Bromwich on a chilly evening, step inside the Old Hoppole. Raise a glass to the past and listen closely for the footsteps of a spirit who's never quite left home. 12. The Admiral Rodney, Sheffield. Sheffield, once the beating heart of Britain's steel industry, is a city shaped by sweat, steel, and stories whispered through the ages. Tucked away on a quiet street stands the Admiral Rodney, a pub with a name that honors a naval hero, but whose walls hold tales of a different kind. In the early 1900s, the Admiral Rodney was a bustling watering hole for steel workers, dockers, and sailors on leave. One story, often told by the older regulars, is that of a young woman named Mary, the daughter of a steelworker known for her bright laugh and fierce spirit. Mary was engaged to a sailor, a man who often left on long voyages, promising to return home safe. One bitter winter night, the sailor never came back. The news came slowly, a ship lost at sea during a fierce storm. Heartbroken, Mary visited the Admiral Rodney every night, clutching a candle, hoping to see her beloved's face in the flickering shadows. After she passed away, many claimed her spirit stayed behind, a restless presence forever waiting. Visitors and staff alike report seeing a faint figure near the bar, a woman in a simple dress holding a candle that never seems to burn down. Some have heard soft footsteps echoing through empty rooms, or the gentle sound of a sigh mingled with the hum of conversation. One bartender once found a glass filled with water untouched, left on the edge of the bar as if waiting to be claimed. Others speak of sudden drops in temperature, a coldness that feels more sorrowful than frightening. Mary's presence is not malevolent. She's a reminder of love and loss, of hope clung to against impossible odds. So if you're ever in Sheffield, and the night falls heavy over the city's steel skeletons, stop by the Admiral Rodney. Light a candle of your own, raise a glass, and remember Mary, the girl who waits for love, still shining through the shadows. 13. Horse and Jockey Pub, Whitchurch. Nestled in the tranquil market town of Whitchurch, where green fields stretch as far as the eye can see and the quiet is broken only by the song of birds, stands the Horse and Jockey, a pub that has welcomed travelers and locals for centuries. But behind its cheerful facade and roaring fires lies a tale soaked in mystery and sorrow. Long ago, in a time when horses were the fastest way to travel and the roads were wild and unforgiving, a jockey rode into Whitchurch during a fierce storm. The man was known across the region for his skill and daring, but his luck was said to be cursed. That stormy night, seeking refuge from the pouring rain and biting wind, he stopped at the Horse and Jockey. He ordered a drink, and as the pub filled with warmth and laughter, the jockey sat quietly in a corner, his eyes distant. When dawn broke, the jockey was gone. His horse was still tied outside, restless, but the man had vanished without a trace. From that day, strange things began to happen. Late at night, when the pub is empty and the wind howls across the fields, patrons swear they hear the soft thud of hooves echoing on the wooden floors. Some have glimpsed a shadowy figure in a battered hat, sitting alone by the fire, staring into the flames. Glasses sometimes clink gently, as if in a silent toast to a guest who never quite left. And on foggy mornings, muddy hoofprints appear mysteriously in the back room, leading nowhere. Yet, despite the eerie signs, the spirit is no harbinger of fear. Locals believe the jockey watches over the Horse and Jockey, a silent guardian for travelers and wanderers, a reminder of journeys taken and those yet to come. So, if your path ever leads you to Whitchurch and the evening sky turns dusky blue, step inside the Horse and Jockey. Raise your glass, listen closely, and perhaps you'll feel the steady beat of hooves on the floorboards, the heartbeat of a spirit still riding through the night. Subscribe to Creepy Experience and hit the bell so you never miss a chilling story. If you've had any creepy pub encounters, share them in the comments. We love hearing your spooky experiences.